looking for direction, and ended up meeting through my late stepfather, Abbie Mann, who created Kojak. He also won the Oscar for Judgment at Nuremberg, one of the most important films on the Holocaust. And growing up in a Hollywood house, let me say this: wasn't a lot of nepotism. Wasn't trying to be an actor. Wasn't trying to be a writer. Just was trying to be a kid, and ended up just sort of not finding my way. And I ended up meeting an Israeli general who was a guest at our house. And he said to me, looked at me, and he said, "Aaron, you need to go to Israel. Go spend the summer. It's going to help you figure out what you want to do." And so I moved to Israel for the summer.
And you were 18?
I was 17 years old. This would have been in 1993.
Okay.
Spent a summer on a kibbutz called Kibbutz HaZorea, which is up in the north near the Kinneret, or in the Migdal Shalom, which is where the majority of the kibbutzim are located in the north, not far from Megiddo.
Yeah.
And ended up spending a summer on a kibbutz, fell in love with the country, fell in love with the people, start to reconnect of, what it means to be a Jew who grew up in the diaspora, to come back to Israel. You don't really put the pieces together until you're physically in Israel. I've talked about this. It's a thing when you hit Israel, man. Something about the hot air. As soon as that door opens, when it hits your face, there's in Hebrew we say, yesh bazeh, a kesher. There's a connection that just hits, and it's very.
You were home.
It was definitely the first time I felt like I was where I belonged, and that would be the correct term. I felt like I was home, and so I spent the summer there, did a very intensive, what they call ulpan, which is intensive Hebrew, starting first, second grade Hebrew. I didn't speak a word. And ended up graduating first and second grade Hebrew in about 3 months. You earn your keep on the kibbutz. You work for your pay. You don't get paid. You work. I was in the fish ponds. All the Israeli SEALs work in the fish ponds there. You're fishing for 18 hours a day, and started getting in really good shape. And as I was traveling around Israel, I started to see the soldiers. I started to see the connection between the land and the people protecting it. And I said, that's what I want to go do. I didn't have an immediate inclination to. I thought about the U.S. military. I thought about the Marines. I thought about going into trying out for a special operations unit. But when I got to Israel, it just hit me. And I saw the soldiers, and everyone's carrying rifles in Israel. But
including the women?
Including the women. But you almost feel safer.
Oh, yeah.
With the weapons, knowing that you're surrounded by, a dozen Arab countries who are committed to pushing Israel into the ocean for the last 75 years. Let's take it back 3,000 years, back to all the way back to the old Talmud, and felt this connection. And I decided to volunteer for the IDF, and so I got back to LA and I made Aliyah, which is becoming an Israeli citizen, coming back to Israel. And the following, about 4 months later, I was in Israel, getting indoctrinated into the IDF, and I had about 4 months to prepare physically. And
how did your family feel, by the way, when you went up?
My mother was terrified. My mother was terrified. She was, you're going to go to the IDF, you can go to the Israeli army. We're not Israelis. We're not from Israel. You don't speak the language. But she's always been very supportive of me. And to this day, she tells me, she goes, there was no way I could stop you. So whatever that was, she goes, there was no way I could stop you. I was never going to be able to pull you back or hold you back. So I ended up moving to Israel and mobilized into the IDF. And Israel has a different structure. Israel doesn't have the time to train a soldier. They've got 20 months. You don't have 10 years to build yourself into this, that, and the other. Like, they need guys going into these elite units right away. So immediately you're testing. You're doing what's called psychometry.
You're always on war footing.
Yes, so everything's got to move quick. So the beautiful thing about Israel is that because everybody has to serve, they can choose from the best and the brightest of the high school students in Israel. And at the time, there was a lot of really, really incredible volunteers for the units. And so I originally tried out for Seret Matkal, which is Israel's General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, Unit 269.
A pretty famous unit.
It's a famous unit. 3 former prime ministers, 4 chiefs of staff, Bibi Netanyahu, who I adore. Bibi's a powerhouse. Anyone who thinks he's not, there's a reason why he's been. I say to the Americans, meddle when it comes to politics and Schumer. Bibi's been in power for a long time for a reason, because he's got the stamina, because he comes from Seyrat Matkal. This 269 unit is what it's referred to as. And it's essentially an intelligence unit. It was the unit that rescued over 100 hostages in Entebbe, Uganda in 1976.
Yoni Netanyahu.
Yoni was killed. Yoni is a national treasure.
Yeah.
And so I know how personal this war is for Bibi, and I know how personal this is for the soldiers of the IDF. He sees himself as the father of these soldiers who've been fighting their hearts out in Gaza for the last 4 months. And so I ended up trying out for Matkal. Got sprained my ankle terribly. It's a 5-day hell week. You get absolutely tortured for 5 days. However, it weeds out the committed from the non-committed, and ended up making it through the week, but then getting told I didn't have the security clearance to get into the unit. And I said to him, I said, well, you couldn't have told me that on day 3. However, they were looking at me and eyeing me for something else, and that's when I was recruited to begin the pipeline in a unit called the Mista Aravim. Mista Aravim literally in Hebrew means to become an Arab, and it comes from the Arabic word Mustarabim. And Mustarabim is a word that describes the Jews who lived or came to Israel from the Arab countries, who were kicked out of those countries and killed and forced to leave.
You don't hear much about that.
That's right.
Those are the forgotten refugees.
Those are the real,
close to 1 million.
That's the real genocide that nobody's talking about here, and that's several 100,000 Sephardic Jews or Sfaradim who lived in Iraq, who lived in Syria, who lived in Lebanon, who lived in Jordan, who lived in Yemen, and were forced to leave those countries because they were Jewish. And so was recruited into this Mustarabim unit, which literally means to become an Arab. And so began the pipeline in the unit.
And you're young.
I was 18 years old. I just turned 18, and went through a grueling 15-month training pipeline.
Learning Arabic, of course.
Well, I was just before I figured out how to be an Israeli. I was starting to have to figure out how to be an Arab. So yes, so the unit specializes in infiltrating hotbed terrorist neighborhoods as an Arab. And what Israel had learned was counterterrorism special operations is about small, highly trained commando elements that can disguise themselves. The Glock 19, the AR, those are part of your toolkit, but your main weapon is your face. Your face, and being able to infiltrate without somebody knowing or recognizing that face is the weapon. And so that infiltrating undetected is one of the most critical pieces of counterterrorism operations. And so there were several units created, a couple in the IDF, a couple in the Israeli police. The Mossad has versions of them. The Israeli Shin Bet, our FBI, or the Sheirut Bitachon Klilei, our General Security Services unit has them as well. And you learn the mannerisms, you learn the cultures, you learn the traditions. You have to be able to get into these neighborhoods undetected for the purpose of being able to, it's almost like taking a knife, putting it in a pile of 1 million ants and pulling out one little ant and then bringing it back to Israel for trial interrogation. And there were 2 units created, one for the West Bank, which was my unit. There was another unit created for Gaza called Shimshon. And during the Oslo Peace Accords, the Shimshon unit was disbanded, which was a major mistake, which allowed Hamas to continue to flourish, because these units do critical maintenance. It's like SEAL Team 6, it's like DevGru, it's like Delta Force, and these units have to constantly be active, especially with terrorism. And so served in that unit, and I will say that was the beginning of my counterterrorism career with Israel, and I'm going to leave it at that. But I will say that it was a very good starting point to be able to have a baseline for understanding the cultures and the traditions. And I've taken those skills since. I've also been training law enforcement for 20 years here in the United States and in Israeli tactics. And unfortunately, we're probably going to see a need for those tactics, Eric, in the next not too far long from here.
No doubt. You and I are going to break that down, Aaron. Number one, the hit show Fauda. If anyone knows about Fauda, hit series out of Israel based on your unit.
Based on mine. So Fauda in Hebrew, in Arabic means chaos.
Yeah.
It's an
appropriately
expression.
named.
So Lior Raz, who I don't know, also served in a Mista Aravim unit. And Fauda is
one of the stars of the show.
He is the star of the show. He's the co-creator of the show. very proud of what he was able to do by bringing the Mistaravim to Netflix. It's a huge accomplishment. I like to see Israelis do well. It's a massive hit. They're going into season 5, if I'm not mistaken. A bunch of friends of mine work on the series as tech advisors, tactical trainers. But I think Lior Raz has done an incredible job. The units have embraced him because it's a great recruiting tool for the unit also. A lot of his young Israelis are going, hey, I want to do that. You know what I mean?
And how about the Aaron Cohen, John Wick link?
Yes, that link's been around for a while. So I was tapped by the director and the stunt coordinator back in 2015 or 16. I got a call and they said, hey, Bubba, Aaron, I need you to come in, man. Keanu's got to spend some real time with a guy like you.
This is Keanu Reeves.
This is Keanu Reeves, yeah. So this was, they were getting ready to gear up for John Wick 2. And the director said to me, he goes, you're the closest person I know to the actual John Wick, given the nature of the work that you did. I need you to come in and spend as much time as you can with Keanu. He's got to soak up your personality, but I want you to teach him some of the Israeli stuff too, because it'll add a different flavor to his fight style. And about 10 years ago, I started working on a fight style which I affectionately call gunjitsu. So I started blending it's the first martial arts blend of MMA with tactical shooting. And so that's that marriage of the blocking and the shooting with the striking and the Aikijitsu and the BJJ, and start putting it. It was an honor. You know, I got called out with the Gracies, the Machados. Higa Machado was one of Keanu's instructors. So I was honored to join a very high level of instructors who got to spend several months with Keanu, sort of spinning him up for John Wick 2. And you know, who knows? Maybe there's a movie in my future where we can save some of that nectar for some on-screen stuff.
Well, hey, again, the memoir is called Brotherhood of Warriors. It's excellent, Aaron. Everyone pick it up wherever books are sold. Amazon.com. It's out there. Bestseller. How long were you in the Special Forces? Eventually, you come back to the United States, and we're going to get into the state of play right now: Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, etc. But real quick, just last question on that front, on a personal front, Aaron. How long are you in the unit? When do you come back here and kind of get back into American civilian life?
So my service total's about 3 years, a little bit shorter in Israel. My total service time was approximately 3 years. Half of that is training. That's your pipeline. Is a ton of time you're going to spend on the range, and getting the skill set and the tools that you need to be able to conduct those missions. Very dangerous unit, but you're trained to a ridiculously high standard. I would compare it to DevGru or SEAL Team 6 or Delta. There's no unit in the U.S. military that's equivalent to the Mistaravim. Maybe the CIA's Special Activity Division would have something similar to it, paramilitary type of unit where you would take linguistics experts who speak Arabic and then spin them up into the tactical portion. So you're looking at a total of approximately 3 years. I got back 2000, just before 9/11. Ended up working as a bodyguard.
And the second Intifada.
That's correct. That's correct. Well. Yeah, and ended up moving back to LA. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Didn't know what I wanted to. I didn't know what to wear. You know, there's a lot of things that veterans experience when they come back or they get out of the military. You know, there's an identity crisis. You know, you go from being able to deal with millions of dollars of equipment and
especially
responsibility.
in your unit. I mean, you're deep undercover. I have a friend also, formerly deep undercover in Israel. Aaron worked in Arab areas, and he said I would come home, and just out of force of habit, I would accidentally speak Arabic to my family.
Yeah, I still order cigarettes in Arabic when I'm in Israel. Yeah, well, I don't smoke, but back then, you know, I would go to, or if I go to a Lebanese restaurant here when I'm in Los Angeles, I immediately go to Arabic.
You're so deeply immersed
well, it's in the DNA.
Culture.
It's in the bone marrow, especially when you do it at such an intense level where, you know, you're carrying the weight of forward operations at a very high level. So, came back to Los Angeles, moved into Brad Pitt's house, ended up doing his security for about a year and a half. Wow. For an Israeli company, a great guy who gave me my start in the security business, and then 9/11 hit. Yeah. Then I got a call from a police agency that said, "Hey, can you teach us some of the Israeli stuff? We need to explore that." And so they got forward thinking. And then spent the next 15 years balancing between security details for different politicians, different celebrities, CEOs, and training law enforcement in the Israeli model of counterterrorism, which is really interesting. It's behavioral based. And what I mean by that is Israel has completely revamped how they work terrorism as far as shooting, as far as hostage rescue. The way we do things is very different. Israel ended up looking at all the data from all the wars and all the terror attacks, and they said, we've got to figure out a better way to do this. How do we keep the commandos safer? How do we keep the cops safer when they're responding to an active shooter? And so they got with the behavioral scientists and looked at what naturally happens under stress, how the body reacts, and then built a tactical system around that, which is what I now teach to law enforcement. Wow. It's brilliant. And I don't know if you've heard me talking about limited penetration room clearing over the last 5 months. You can clear the entire room without going into the room.
And by the way, Fox News, you're everywhere since October 7th, and thank God we have your expertise, which brings us to this moment right now, Aaron. Your unit right now, first of all, active, I would imagine, in one of the theaters up north, down south?
Extremely active in Gaza right now, in a very quiet capacity, but this is a special team that's been stood up due to the unit's high level of urban operational capability. I can tell you that there's a classified team that's been stood up specifically to be able to deal with special needs within Gaza. And they're doing a fantastic job. They've been in there for over, I believe the first team was in there for over 111 days at the beginning of the campaign. Incredible group of guys, all active duty guys, but there's a big reserve component. My unit was kicking down the door to get into Gaza.
Hey, break down too just how this is completely unprecedented, what the IDF is facing in Gaza, tightly compressed, urban warfare, tightly packed, in terms of a small area of land but such a large population. This seems to be unprecedented, at least in the history of modern warfare.
Well, take Fallujah and multiply that times 500 in terms of density, in terms of 90-degree angles, and in terms of space or limited space. The battles of Fallujah were incredibly fierce with the United States Marines, with the U.S. Navy SEALs back in Iraq. And let's magnify that now, and let's amplify the amount of terrorists within that urban area, or within those 5 cities, Rafah, Khan Yunis, Jabalia, and the other neighborhoods within Gaza. But now let's add the New York City 1,300-kilometer subway system underneath.
Terror tunnels.
And Israel has brought them down to the 3 remaining battalions. They started off with about 20. So
a lightning fast.
Israel
not even
is
6
breaking
months.
Special Operations Forces records in the global war on terror.
This is going to be studied.
This is going to be studied at West Point,
doubt.
Annapolis, and every major military and law enforcement agency. I'll be speaking to a monster group of law enforcement leaders in June down in Florida, talking about what makes Israel so effective. And we don't have a choice.
But why the howls from the world? You would think, Aaron, that this has been there's been a massive amount of civilian casualties in Gaza, and there hasn't been, by the way.
No.
But the world continues to howl. What you're saying is absolutely 100% correct. This has been a phenomenal, unprecedented operation by the IDF, lightning success, with a minimum of civilian casualties, and the IDF goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties. You're not hearing that in the mainstream media.
So Hamas has managed to infiltrate all the way up to the White House with their psychological warfare. And what I mean by that is, first of all, the numbers that are being reported on the deaths of the Palestinians are reported by Hamas, which runs the Ministry of Health.
The Gazan Health Ministry.
There's an old expression in Arabic. I'm going to share it with you. And it's Badak al-Haqohu, which means, and this is very, very specific to the Palestinian culture, which literally translated means, do you want the truth or do you want his brother? You get where I'm going with this?
I do.
And so I believe the numbers are so astronomically exaggerated that I wouldn't be surprised if they're less than 20% of the actual civilian casualties, and I can tell you why. The amount of beatings, Eric, that I took to make sure that my barrel is only focused on a threat with a weapon There's probably a good 3 chapters that covers that in my memoir. The amount of selectivity, the amount of focus it takes to be able to work in those areas is unlike any other campaign in the history of warfare. As far as Rafah, Israel can move every civilian to safe pockets of Rafah, slowly, concerted, which I eventually believe is what's going to start to happen, and it's probably already happening quietly. But the amount of selectivity that Israel has used is unheard of compared to Germany, compared to all of the other conflicts that have involved major urban centers. And so the amount of misinformation that's being put out because of social media and because of the media right now is unprecedented. But I can tell you that Israel is looking closely at those mechanisms to make sure that the correct information is being distributed. And that's also part of what I'm doing as well, to try and help with that messaging so that people are aware that lying is part of the terrorist culture. I don't know how else to explain it.
Aaron, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that the IDF probably has the most strict rules of engagement that we've ever seen, number one. And secondly, I would say the IDF today is the most humane fighting force in human history.
Eric, I want to talk about Al Jazeera. I spent 5 months staring at this, at the media that they've been putting out, and the amount of lies that they've been delivering via their network. They just retracted a statement about supposed women who were raped by the IDF soldiers. They just came back, they retracted the statement, they apologized for it. The amount of lies and misinformation that are coming out of Al Jazeera, which is owned by incitement, and of the most rhetoric that I've seen is coming from this Qatari-run network. I believe Israel ousted their office out of Israel because of the misinformation and really just straight out lies. And when I see the feed, I stare at it and I say to myself, how is a network like this allowed to be in business without any fact checking? And there were multiple media outlets that were misreporting the original missile that hit the hospital back in October.
Yes.
And everybody jumped on it to report. But I'm going to say this. I remember going on, and I remember speaking to one of the networks, and I remember the fear that the reporters, the anchors had when they were asking me about the attacks that were coming from Lebanon, that were coming from Hezbollah, the troops that had just started mounting on the border in Gaza, the Givati Brigade, the Golani Brigade. And we're going to talk about Israel's incredible capabilities and how this reserve military comes together and how good they are at fighting. Unfortunately, it's a skill, that's a warrior culture that's 75 years old but goes back a lot farther. And I remember how scared the anchors were, and I looked at them and I said, guys, I said, this isn't Israel's first rodeo getting attacked by multiple fronts. I go, give us a week. We're going to get the machine nice and oiled here, and you guys are going to see some magic. And it's going to happen with the hostages. It's going to happen in Gaza. Lebanon's going to get dealt with. Syria's going to get dealt with. And we've already seen 2 hostages get rescued since.
Mm-hmm. You did. Aaron, you have been, I would say, an encouraging, reassuring presence for the past 6 months on various TV networks talking about this war.
Eric, people need to understand that Israel's a warrior culture. War is one of the unfortunate tangents that makes the Israeli culture so dynamic, but so capable, not only in business after doing your 3 years in the IDF and moving on and development in tech, but it creates the spice of the culture, and it creates the personalities. It's an unfortunate tangent that brings Israel together, but I will say this, nobody comes together like the Israelis, like the Jews, our Christian partners, our Muslim partners, our Druze partners, our Bedouin partners, our Phalange partners. And when war hits and we get attacked from all sides, Israel becomes a magical place. When you look at Purim and the kids running around in costumes while 3 brigades are inside of Gaza clearing active pockets of terrorism less than 60 kilometers away, It's an incredible thing. It's a thing that I can't explain. It's an unfortunate part of the Israeli system, but I think it's one of the things that really makes us unique as a people. It's one of the things that I really appreciated was getting to experience that camaraderie, which is it's a magical thing, unfortunately.
Agreed. Just from being in Israel a few weeks ago, Aaron, the unity and the resilience of the people of Israel right now was amazing. And there was an attitude of, you know what, we know the world is gnashing its teeth over what we're doing. We don't care. We're doing the right thing, and we're going to do what we need to do to defend the world's one and only Jewish state. And it was almost like a gathering of the ranks.
Israel's going to go into Rafah. They're going to clear it out. They're going to be as careful as possible. There's hostages that I believe are potentially still in. There's 134 who are still being held. And I think the world is starting to see that Israel's getting tired of these narratives, these made-up narratives about this genocide. We don't genocide people. That term has been misused. It's colonial nonsense, white thing, this and that Israel has been spun out of control. It's absolute nonsense. The 18 to 24-year-olds have lost their way. Stop getting your education on TikTok.
Exactly.
However, I can tell you that this generation of IDF soldiers, Eric, there was a little bit of trepidation from the older generation, my generation. We were, looking at female IDF soldiers dancing on TikTok and having fun, and everybody agrees that this generation has absolutely brought it and has been able to carry the torch of the Tzivah Haganah L'Israel, the Israel Defense Forces, to another level. And the spirit is something that every Israeli is talking about right now. And I'm proud to say that I come from that lineage. It's incredible. Naftali Bennett, Prime Minister Netanyahu, everyone will agree. The spirit of this generation has far surpassed anything that we expected because of this TikTok generation.
Exactly.
But the Israelis, these kids have been incredible, and the reservists who've left their businesses for the last 6 months, who've left their families for the last 6 months. And here's the thing, like I said, on October 9th, Israel's organized now. It's okay. There's nothing to worry about, and the reason why is because when it comes to counterterrorism and to fighting war on multiple fronts, we have a lot of experience here. And what you're seeing right now is the VIPs unfolding.
Yeah, it's a battle for survival, number one.
That's right.
Number two, that was one of my big takeaways, Aaron, from being in Israel a few weeks ago. I came home and I said to my wife, Generation Z in Israel, Generation Z in America. Two different stories. Like you said, warrior culture, a battle for survival, just the maturity, the seriousness of young people in Israel. Look, you were 18 in a special forces unit going undercover in Arab areas. It's just a different breed. It's a different way of life.
You definitely cut from a different cloth, and but I can tell you that there's something about that service that gives you a perspective, and definitely puts you in a position of gratefulness afterwards for opportunities, to be able to sit with you, to be able to share my knowledge and to transfer knowledge to law enforcement for the last 20 years. I've been a reservist. I've been a SWAT cop and a tactical trainer with a sheriff's agency. I don't get paid. I do it as a reservist. It's my favorite job, Eric. Yeah. It's still my favorite job. When I call up my sheriff, hey man, when am I coming out? Well, let's go. So it's the ability to be able to transfer the knowledge. Yes, you're absolutely forced to grow up at lightning speed compared to this TikTok generation here in the United States. But unfortunately, there's going to be more terrorism coming here, and I think there's going to be a change in the mindset here in the United States, Eric. And the reason why is because there's a bigger problem, and it's Iran. And Iran's got a global view on how they see the world. And Hamas is just a tiny little piece. Hezbollah is a tiny little piece. And the Houthis are a tiny little piece.
Iran's the head of the snake.
Eric, there's a holy war brewing. There's a global jihad brewing right now, and Israel's doing everyone's work right now. And if the Western worlds are smart and the Western democracies are smart, they're going to take from Israel's lessons and start figuring out what their playbook is, because you and I are going to be talking about this a lot more.
Yeah, we will. Israel is the first line of defense for the West, Aaron, and if Israel goes down, we all go down. Israel won't go down, but as you said, the West needs to wake up. I don't know if it will, but if it comes here more and more, it should. It may have to. Hey, you and I are going to go downstairs here at the TBN headquarters and film an episode of Stakelbeck Tonight, a round table talking about all these events. Before we go, I do want to ask you about what I've called the coming Great Northern War. Israel obviously very preoccupied in Gaza, about to finish the job there in Rafah of crushing Hamas decisively. Hezbollah is a much different beast and much more dangerous. Iran's crown jewel, I guess you would say, when it comes to the Iranian proxies. The war with Hezbollah, to me, seems unavoidable. And Aaron, you and I were talking off camera. I was on that Lebanon border a few weeks ago, and there's almost a sense of dread. There's some 80,000 Israelis who have left those beautiful communities like Kiryat Shimona in the north, Metula. They don't know when they're going home, when they can get back to normal life. It doesn't seem like Hezbollah is open to diplomacy and UN solutions, needless to say. Is the only way ultimately, do you believe, going to be for the IDF to use military force to deal with Hezbollah in a major way, more than we've seen in these day-to-day, they're more than skirmishes, but these day-to-day clashes we've seen along that border?
So regarding Hezbollah, here's where I'm at with this thing. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, doesn't do anything without the mullah's permission in Iran. The mentality of Hassan Nasrallah in Hezbollah is to understand the Middle East. And when I speak, listen, I'm not a general. And when I speak to counterterrorism, I'm trying to bring you, or I'm trying to speak from the position of how the Arabs think. And that's coming from the Arabist unit, the Mistaravim unit. And so what I believe is that they're going to keep tapping. The escalation will depend on the U.S.'s disposition and how they allow Israel to continue to fight. And the weaker Biden is, or the less aggressive the United States is, with the Houthis who are also funded by Iran, will inform how the Iranians continue to play Hezbollah against Israel. Now, Israel has done a lot of work against Hezbollah quietly, and they're continuing to hit Hezbollah depots. Remember,
including
Eric,
in Syria, not just
right,
Lebanon.
including in Syria, and including potentially, and I can't confirm this, but if I had to guess, I would say that there's already been activity inside of Iran, knowing how Israel thinks. I believe that they're going to continue to terrorize the northern portion of Israel with the 100,000 plus Israelis who have been ejected from their homes or pulled from their homes, which nobody's talking about, which is absolutely unacceptable. But remember, Israel knows southern Lebanon. Israel knows Taibe, Israel knows Marjun, Israel knows these towns. We spent over 15 years patrolling the southern portion of Lebanon when Hezbollah was attacking Israel in that low-intensity conflict decade. That was around my time. And there were some very specialized units that were created to be able to deal with that. So it's got a lot of experience with southern Lebanon. Israel will continue to slap back as those missiles keep coming in, but there will become a point where our chief of staff and our defense minister, a former Israeli SEAL, will say enough. Yeah. It'll be up to them to decide when that time is right. But if at any point Israel feels like a much larger attack is imminent, Israel will preempt because their strength lies in attacking the attack before it can actualize.
And a lesson of October 7th, right?
And a lesson
Don't let it gather.
And a lesson from the Six-Day War. And a lesson from 1973.
Yeah.
And so Israel's lessons are from losses. So because of all of the mistakes that we've made, and I want to make that clear, Israel's not Superman. It's the mistakes that make us better. And so all of those things are getting brought into consideration, but the real work is done by our Mossad and by our Shin Bet intelligence agency. because that information is everything. So if Israel smells a major attack coming, there will be immediate, imminent, preemptive attacks on Hezbollah, regardless of whether or not there's 100,000 of them. And this is me talking to you as Aaron Cohen, putting on the Aaron Cohen hat. Israel will not sleep. Yeah. Israel will go into attack mode the moment they have to.
Wow, precarious time, Aaron. Look, last question. October 7th, I know you were probably, I can't even imagine what you were feeling. You probably wanted to get the next flight over and get in the action, being a former Special Forces operator. That's the first question. Secondly, you seem very optimistic about the future of Israel. I share your optimism and then some. Tell us about what lies ahead for Israel as it navigates maybe the most difficult period in its modern history since 1948.
It's a tough question, Eric. If I had to pontificate, I would say that Israel is going to continue operations to finish up in Rafah. It's going to take longer. The reason why is because the pressure the White House is putting on Israel. They want more selectivity. They want less airstrikes. They want more room clearing, more house to house.
They want perfection.
Let's say they want their cake and they want to eat it too, but the problem is that no one's ever going to criticize the way U.S. military operations are going to be conducted when it comes to terrorism. But there's a double standard with Israel, but we're used to it. We're used to doing a first-rate job with second-rate rules, is how I describe it. So Israel will continue to do Rafah operations. They'll finish up there. It's going to take another 6 to 8 months, potentially a year, because we have to be careful. But the real work is going to begin, and where Israel's really going to go into action is going to be the leadership of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, all of the leaders who are hiding in Qatar, the Israeli intelligence apparatus out of Galilot. Some old friends of mine are going to and have been deciding when it's time to start really trimming the nails. Wow. And
so we're talking not just Sinwar in a tunnel in Gaza, but Khaled Mashal,
we're talking about Khaled Mashal, Ismail Haniyeh, all of the
who's just in Iran, by the way, Ismail Haniyeh.
It's okay. He can hang out there. Yeah. We have a lot of experience there too, and like the Iranians.